It is 1917, and vaudeville stages across the country reverberate with the enthusiastic applause for baby Jane Hudson. A pine-sized prodigy with golden curls and a mischievous glint in her eye, Jane captivates audiences with her singing, dancing, and undeniable stage presence. Her doting father, a man whose ambitions rest entirely on his daughter's diminutive shoulders, acts as both manager and accompanist. His nimble fingers dancing across the piano keys to provide the musical backdrop for Jane's vibrant performances. Jane's success isn't confined to the dazzling footlights and echoing theaters. It spills over into the realm of merchandising, with her likeness adorning a popular line of porcelain dolls. These delicate figurines, dressed in miniature versions of Jane's flamboyant costumes, become cherished possessions for adoring fans, solidifying the child star's image as a national darling. However, the bright spotlight that illuminates Jane casts a long, dark shadow over her older sister Blanche. A quiet and introspective girl, Blanche possesses a gentle beauty and a kind heart, traits that go unnoticed amidst the whirlwind of attention surrounding her younger sister. In the face of Jane's overwhelming success, Blanche fades into the background, enduring not only the sting of obscurity but also the scorn of her increasingly arrogant sibling. Jane, intoxicated by fame and the unwavering adoration of her father, treats Blanche with open contempt, relishing any opportunity to belittle and demean her. The seeds of resentment and jealousy are sown deep within Blanche's heart, creating a rift between the sisters that widens with each passing year. The years following the Hudson sisters' childhood marked a dramatic shift in their fortunes. The whispers from powerful Hollywood producers began to change. Jane, who once commanded the stage as Baby Jane, found her brand of saccharine charm and childish antics losing its appeal. Audiences were evolving, their tastes leaning towards a more mature and nuanced style of performance. Jane, unwilling or unable to adapt, watched in dismay as her bookings dwindled and her name faded from the dazzling marquees. The once adoring crowds thinned, replaced by echoing emptiness, the sting of rejection. As her career spiraled downwards, Jane sought solace in the numbing comfort of alcohol, the amber liquid masking the bitter taste of failure and resentment. While Jane's star dimmed, Blanche's began its ascent. No longer confined to the shadows of her younger sister, Blanche blossomed into a woman of remarkable beauty and talent. Her acting abilities, previously stifled by Jane's domineering presence, finally found a platform on the silver screen. With each role, Blanche captivated audiences, her name becoming synonymous with elegance and grace. Hollywood embraced her, showering her with accolades and adoration. Then, on a fateful evening in 1935, the simmering tension exploded into a tragedy that would forever bind the sisters in a macabre dance of dependence and hatred. Blanche, at the peak of her career, a horrific car accident shattered her life, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. The circumstances surrounding the incident remained shrouded in mystery, but whispers of suspicion followed Jane like a dark cloud. The once vibrant and ambitious actress was found days later, lost in a drunken haze, her memories of the night fragmented and unreliable. The accident served as a cruel twist of fate, binding the sisters together in a twisted reality. Blanche, now confined to a wheelchair and reliant on Jane's care, became a prisoner in her own home, at the mercy of the very person who may have been responsible for her suffering. The echoes of their childhood roles reversed, with Jane assuming the position of caretaker, albeit one fueled by resentment and a warped sense of power. The car accident became a defining moment, a tragic turning point that forever altered the course of their lives and set the stage for the dark and disturbing events that were to follow. By 1962, Blanche and Jane Hudson were trapped in a twisted reality within their mansion, bought with Blanche's movie star earnings. Jane, fueled by resentment of Blanche's successful acting career and her own failures, became her cruel caretaker. Instead of providing care, Jane used Blanche's vulnerability to inflict suffering. She isolated Blanche from the outside world, turning her dependence into a weapon. The torment escalated from psychological to physical, with Jane killing Blanche's pet birds, serving her disgusting meals, and eventually resorting to physical violence. The mansion, a symbol of Blanche's past glory, became a stage for Jane's twisted revenge, where every day was filled with fear and suffering for the helpless Blanche. Jane, determined to recapture her former glory as a child star, begins preparations to perform her old vaudeville act. She hires Edwin Flagg, an experienced pianist, to accompany her. Meanwhile, Blanche informs her sister Jane of her intention to sell their decaying Hollywood mansion, a decision that deeply troubles Jane. correctly suspecting that Blanche plans to have her committed to a psychiatric institution once the house is sold and she has access to the proceeds. Jane takes preemptive action. In an attempt to isolate Blanche and prevent her from communicating with the outside world, Jane surreptitiously removes the telephone from her sister's bedroom. During Jane's absence, Blanche, still confined to her bedroom, seizes a rare opportunity to attempt an escape. Struggling against her restraints and injuries, she painfully drags herself across the floor and down the stairs in a desperate bid for help. Reaching the telephone, she quickly calls her doctor and pleads for him to come to the house and rescue her from Jane's torment. However, Jane unexpectedly returns home while Blanche is still on the call. Enraged to find her sister trying to break free, Jane viciously beats Blanche until she is unconscious, the telephone receiver clattering to the floor. Jane then picks it up and, in a chilling imitation of Blanche's voice, dismisses the doctor, assuring him everything is fine. After tying the battered Blanche back onto her bed and locking her in the room, Jane abruptly fires their loyal housekeeper Elvira when she arrives for her shift. While Jane leaves the house again, the suspicious Elvira grows concerned about Blanche's well-being in the strange situation. She stealthily re-enters and makes her way upstairs, using a hammer to remove the hinge pins on Blanche's bedroom door after receiving no response from inside. Jolted by the noise, Jane rushes home just as Elvira manages to open the door. In a panic, Jane hands over the key, allowing Elvira to discover the horrific truth of Blanche's captivity. But before Elvira can flee or call for help, the deranged Jane bludgeons her to death with the hammer. When Edwin the pianist arrives later to rehearse with Jane, she refuses to let him enter, her paranoia heightening. That night, using Blanche's wheelchair, Jane transports Elvira's lifeless body outside and loads it into the housekeeper's own car. Determined to cover up her brutal crime, a few days after the murder of Elvira, the police call the Hudson mansion to inform Jane that Elvira's cousin has reported her missing. Gripped by panic, Jane realizes her crimes are in danger of being exposed. She hastily makes plans to flee, determined to take the still captive Blanche with her rather than risk her revealing the truth to the authorities. However, before they can make their escape, an inebriated Edwin Flagg arrives at the house, escorted by police officers who had found him drunk and wandering. Leaving Edwin behind, the officers depart, unaware of the sinister situation inside. Edwin, in his drunken state, wanders upstairs and is horrified to discover Blanche bound and imprisoned in her bedroom. He quickly flees the mansion and alerts the police about Blanche's dire condition. Fearing the walls are closing in, Jane suffers a complete mental breakdown, regressing into delusional fantasies from her childhood stardom. She wheels Blanche out to a nearby beach where Jane performed in song and dance routines as a young girl. As morning dawns, news of Elvira's murder and Blanche's captivity broadcast over the radio, sending police on a frantic search. On the lonely beach, Blanche, now severely weakened and near death, shockingly confesses to Jane the truth behind the accident that ended her acting career decades earlier. On the night in question, a drunken and resentful Blanche had actually tried to run over Jane with her car after becoming enraged at her sister's mocking behavior at a Hollywood party. However, the attempt failed and instead Blanche's spine was shattered when her vehicle struck the gates of their mansion. In an ultimate act of cruelty, Blanche had then dragged herself in front of her own car and posed as if Jane had struck her down, framing her horrified sister. Blanche took full advantage of Jane's guilt-ridden shock and subsequent downward spiral into alcoholism, concealing the truth and subjecting her sister to a lifetime of merciless servitude to atone for a crime she did not commit. The realization that their entire dysfunctional, codependent relationship was predicated on Blanche's cruel lie leaves Jane utterly devastated. With tears in her eyes, she looks at her dying sister and laments, "You mean all this time, we could have been friends?" The weight of this revelation is too much for Jane's fragile psyche to process. She gets up and wanders over to a nearby refreshment stand in an almost trance-like state. Jane purchases 2 ice cream cones, one for herself and one for Blanche, as if trying to cling to some small shred of nostalgic innocence. However, Jane's fragile grip on reality has now completely slipped away. Two police officers patrolling the beach immediately recognize the childlike, ice cream-holding figure as the Jane Hudson they've been desperately trying to locate. They approach and attempt to question the distracted Jane about Blanche's whereabouts and condition. But Jane is already fully disconnected, lost in a delusional fantasy realm. She begins singing and dancing exuberantly before the growing crowd of confused beachgoers, twirling with the ice cream cones as if performing one of her memorable childhood vaudeville routines from decades earlier. The curious onlookers watch in bewilderment as this bizarre spectacle unfolds. Realizing Jane is non-responsive and clearly unstable, the officers decide against pressing her further. Jane has successfully dodged their inquiries, retreating completely into her dissociative mental escape as the center of attention she always craved. Indifferent to the harsh reality crashing down around her,